Hi, YouTube and the rest of the world. Taylor and I are in class. We are taking the class called Thinking Outside the Box by Sarah Rodriguez. It is hosted on KPA or Karen Pryor Academy, where all the dog nerds go for classes, and that's what we're doing. But we have an assignment. One of our last assignments is to basically a little think piece, which we're going to read aloud in just a second. But Taylor and I actually decided to do this together and by a video. We usually do this type of stuff live in the class, but since Taylor and I are partners, we did not want to be boring in class and give literally the identical answer because we do everything together. So we figured we would go ahead and answer this question together and work it out live, but well, in a video. But yes, okay. So Taylor, read us this prompt so that we can show everyone how smart we are.
Hey everyone, so here's the prompt. So the prompt is an elderly couple adopted a 2-year-old golden retriever, Bradley, from the animal shelter. He was used as a breeder dog and has lived outdoors in the kennel. He is extremely high energy and the couple can't restrain him on a leash. He has knocked down the husband and jumps all over the couple every morning, so they have to put him outside when they have coffee, while they have coffee. Bradley can't be walked by either client due to his strength. He has already gotten away from the wife once when he saw another dog. How would you approach this case?
Okay, Bradley, Brad. We're gonna call this golden retriever Brad because I feel like that's more suitable for his behavior that we're hearing. Okay, so Taylor and I obviously have already gone over some of these points because if we didn't, this would turn into a 2-hour consultation, which is something we sell. But we wanted to be rather concise about this. So first things first, diving into this topic, it's a little complicated. Starting with any case, it does not matter if there are any special parameters around them. We want to know what the client wants from training, point blank period. Regardless of the information that we gather, regardless of what we think they should be doing, along the lines of safety, of course. There are certain things and lines that Taylor and I will not cross. Like if there's children involved in the household and something seems dangerous, we are going to lay down the law in terms of what we will allow, what we will not allow in terms of working with clients. But for the sake of just talking about this particular case, we want to identify with these clients specifically what's important. What do you want to get done? Because just because Bradley is knocking down his parents does not inherently mean that that is the problem that they are having. They could be totally into that and they actually just want to have a nice dining setting with Bradley sitting at the table. So let's go ahead and identify what these people want. Now, for obvious reasons, we're going to guess that they want the dog to stop jumping on them. So we're going to dig deeper in how we will achieve this goal or help them achieve this goal. But we do need to first and foremost identify what is important to them, what are their goals, and one component that we really like to inject is the order of importance. So not just identifying what their goals are, but also what is what needs to be solved sooner rather than later. And this could be dependent on safety. It could also be dependent on convenience. And again, that's strictly up to the client. So on to the second point, Taylor.
All right, so the next point that I'm going to bring up is super important. This is something that we ask all of our dogs whenever, all of our clients, whenever we ask our dogs, we ask the dogs this, but we ask the clients this whenever we are consulting with them for every single dog. We ask about the medical history of the dog. So this dog, Bradley, was recently adopted, so they may not know much, but they may know something. You'd be surprised. So we want to know, does Bradley have any medical conditions that could be affecting his behavior? And even if you think that it doesn't affect the behavior, we still want to know everything. Has Bradley ever had heartworms? Is he going through heartworm treatment? But we also want to know if he's on any medications that may be affecting his behavior. And if there was no medical workup, we may suggest that Bradley get a medical workup just in case to make sure everything is okay.
Taking in the medical history is really important because given that this case is already a little difficult with the primary caregivers being elderly and a dog being able to overpower them, we don't want to make any assumptions that this is a green 2-year-old golden retriever. This might be a dog that's seen some things. So we want to make sure that what this dog is capable of doing in this moment of time with these caregivers who are already limited. We don't want to make any assumptions. So this is why we like to go down that route, just to make sure that there aren't any other limiting aspects that we need to be mindful of. On to the next point. We want to go ahead and identify who the primary caregiver is or what their roles are going to be in the household. So, with the information that we're given, we are aware that there are two people that live in this house that own this dog who are not able to walk them. That's all we know, but you don't want to make any assumptions. I really can't tell you how many times we've had a surprise roommate or child, even. We are like, oh, I didn't really, you never even mentioned that you had a child or a cousin or a roommate or anything like that. So, don't want to make any assumptions about who's in the house. We may also ask about any other animals in the household as well, because
that.
you will be surprised how many times people are trying to achieve their goals, and then here comes like 15-year-old Lolo who gets away with murder. And so the other dog's like not learning anything. So yeah, I want to make sure again, any circumstances in the house that are going to cause any form of distraction, but also um who's willing to help if there is any other help at all. It's not uncommon for people to only have themselves, which is totally fine. We will figure it out, but these are details that we do need to know. And then we also need to be made aware if there are any guests that frequent the home. So this isn't just like, the homie that pops by once a month, although honestly, if it's as predictable as once a month, we may actually want to know that. But if there are people who are coming in and out like often, like they might as well live there, like they basically have a key to your house, then this person is also going to frequently interact with this dog, or is not going to frequently interact with the dog and needs to understand like how to orient themselves in the house around the dog situation. So we just kind of want to know like who's in and out of the house, who's going to be affecting the dog's behavior, if at all.
And after that, we want the client to describe the environment. So typically, like Gio said, we do our consultations virtually. So we don't really know the layout of the house until we get there. But we want our clients to explain what they're working with. So do you have a yard? Does the yard have a fence? Any security doors, any way to make sure the dog cannot get out just in case the door is left open. And is the house, does it have rooms or is it an open floor plan? Open floor plans are very popular now, which makes it really hard to put up a gate or any kind of barrier in the house because, again, there are no walls, just an open floor plan. Knowing this helps us out tremendously in regards to management and setting up the house for the dog and for the client. Also, things outside the environment. For example, are there any neighbor dogs that we need to worry about? Does Bradley have a tendency to bark at dogs from the fence? Knowing these things is very helpful.
Given the information that we have about Bradley, it's probably reasonable to assume that he's a dog that's easily influenced by external factors. And since these two are already struggling just to have him on leash, we want to make sure that there's not going to be anything else that's going to lead to dangerous behavior, knocking them over, hurting them, or even harming himself. So we do really want to be aware of what that environment looks like so that the dog doesn't get himself into trouble, or anyone else into trouble.
Making sure that everything is secure. Like you said, I know you said security doors, but is the yard secure? Can he get out? Has he gotten out before? We've had many cases where dogs have, oh, you just snuck under the house. Like, okay, we need to close that gap because once the dog figures out how to get out in one way, they probably will do it again.
All right, so the next point, what we're going to start tackling is actually pinpointing whatever the problem behaviors are. So we are aware of the scenario of him getting away, them not being able to walk him jumping, all that mess. But we actually want the clients to describe in detail exactly what they are experiencing from the dog, and this is going to include the exact experience, not just like a vague description. So oftentimes people will say, oh, my dog just jumps on me, or they do yada yada yada, and they're not very specific about the time of day, the circumstance that surrounds that particular instance. And people often tend to hyperfixate on all the bad that their dog does. They don't realize that the dog is often good 90% of the time. So we want to really identify, hey, is Bradley causing chaos all the time, or is this just around certain times of day, like meal times, or when somebody comes over, things like that. So we really just need to identify when they are seeing behavior that they dislike from Bradley, but then also identify every time that they are experiencing favorable behavior from Bradley as well. So partially to get their minds off of the fact that he does cause a lot of stress in their lives, and they probably feel a little helpless about that. But also to kind of pinpoint hey, there are areas that we could be working on, or even, like starting to throw easy reinforcement at to start encouraging, oh, actually, Bradley does like to lay on the couch. And like maybe they don't mind that he lays on the couch. And so this is something like a really nice starting point for some people where they're like, oh, my dog does know how to relax. He just only relaxes in this area. And you can kind of build off of what we already know. But we do need to know it. So really trying to figure out what is his daily behavior like, when are the problems, but then also identifying what else they would like to see. This is kind of going to that first point of their goals, but also we kind of like to dig in this area as well, in terms of weighing some options and how they would like to fix that problem, whether or not they would like to rely strictly on management, or if they do in fact want to take the strides for training, if they have um, the ability to do that. We'll kind of pinpoint that more. But that kind of segues on to our next point, which is
Management. So this is a tricky point for me because we really don't have much information. The first thing I want to say is that they are already managing him in a good way. They're putting him outside when they're having their coffee time. They have identified that it is the coffee time that is the worst scenario, so they put him outside while they're drinking coffee. Not before they even drink coffee to make sure he doesn't jump at all, which is a smart thing. But kind of not going too far into this, I want to stress, we don't know that much about this case. So when we said, does it take for off? Does he have moments when he's not doing it? Because if he's only jumping during meal time, that's actually less work for us and less work for them. But again, we have to know, and we as trainers have to dig to get this information. So other things that I was thinking that they could do is invest in extra tall baby gates, pressurized baby gates, the regular, not the flimsy ones you find at Marshall, TJ Maxx. I cannot stand those gates. You're looking for a gate that would withstand the pressure of a dog like Bradley. I'm going to assume Bradley's like 50, 60 pounds, maybe. I'm not sure. So he has some weight behind him. So extra tall, pressurized big gate. And maybe setting up a scenario where he is behind this gate. You put him behind the gate before you start eating or drinking your coffee, and he is behind there. You give him a chew so that he has something to occupy his mind while y'all are eating. And then after that, you can let him out if he is not jumping all the time. Maybe he's just jumping during this time. Extra baby gates to physically separate him from the clients is going to be a big thing that we would recommend. And it doesn't have to just be during coffee times. It can be during any time that Bradley gets on their nerves to be honest. You know what? Go over here while I do this until the training comes in. So what's really important is whenever we recommend this kind of management to people, we're not saying that it's permanent. I'm not telling y'all who I'm talking to here, right? I'm not telling y'all to get a baby gate and then say, all right, that's it. No, the baby gate is there until we get more training in to see if Bradley is capable of handling certain situations. So for right now, he has no training. So baby gate and putting them outside is the best thing we can do. We don't have crate training either. I have lower in the notes that we may approach crate training if we have time, but crate training takes time. Putting a gate up is typically easier. Hopefully Bradley is okay with the gate. Some dogs not okay with gate. So if he wasn't okay with the gate, I recommend a tether instead. A tether in the house, back tie, where he's tied to something and he cannot get too close. That's also a really, really good way of managing a dog. And to explain that further, a leash can be on a harness, and that leash is tied to a piece of furniture that cannot move. You can determine how long that leash is. You don't want it to be too short to where he gets frustrated, but you don't want it to be too long to where he can reach you. And giving him something to do, like a chew or a puzzle toy while you do these things, could be an option as well. And another thing I'm going to say is we prioritize training, but we also want to consider equipment too to help with this. So the client cannot walk Bradley because Bradley is so powerful. So this would be a case where we would recommend a head collar. Head collars will give the clients more control over Bradley, period, and it will take some of the pressure away from their hands. We have recommended this to clients who had trouble walking their dogs before. Now, keep in mind, head collars also take time to condition, and for some dogs, they don't mind equipment. Some dogs do mind equipment. So we have in a note lower. Just going to say this again. If the head collar is too inhibitive, then we're going to highly suggest a dog walker or somebody else to walk him and things like that. We'll get into that. But we think that a head collar would be a great thing for this case. I will also add maybe a waist leash. Maybe it depends on the client how that feels. I have used waist leashes. They're not always the most comfortable to me, especially when the dog pulls and it pulls in a certain spot. Maybe I'm just sensitive around my belly, but waist leashes, it has to be a comfortable one. I know that they're all like hiker. I'm trying to point to my body, but it's like hiker. I've seen thick, wide straps that go on people's bodies to help make them feel more comfortable. I'm not sure. So what I will also do is research methods and equipment that the client could wear to where they could have the leash attached to their waist and be comfortable with that.
When it comes to management, again, this is going to be the setup of management and the priority is going to pertain towards their goals, what they've established, and that order of importance. So we also consider the financial burdens of management tools and things like that. Some people do not have the resources to acquire a bunch of $100 gates that might be required for the way that their house is shaped. So in that aspect, we might have to rely on just what they have, like closing the door and working from there, which oftentimes is not the favorite for a lot of dogs, but it is what it is. And then it is not uncommon for clients to not really be on a training track for super long, because people have lives and don't necessarily want to be dog trainers themselves. So it's not uncommon for us to suggest equipment that has been properly conditioned that basically equals out the weight of, or the force that the dog can put, with additional training and whatnot. If there's not an extensive amount of training, we do need to consider the safety of the client above all else. So that is why we would probably encourage a head collar. We of course would encourage any other type of equipment that they'd like to try along the happy realm that we like to float in. We of course are going to prioritize their safety above all else. So okay, so moving on with that, we're also going to jump into, enrichment. This is a 2-year-old golden retriever who is jumping. He's probably very energetic. His name is Bradley, so we're just going to go with Mr. Bradley energy there. So the first thing we're going to ask again is kind of circling back if there's any household help, or if they have the means to hire a dog walker. Now, in terms of having a dog walker, we would probably encourage a little bit of training before then. I don't necessarily think it's fair to unload a 2-year-old chaotic dog with a walker with no experience. You want to make sure that your dog has a little bit of just a tiny bit of manners. So they're not just like yanking that person's shoulder out. Go ahead, Taylor.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I forgot to put this there. But he in the prompt to say he went after a dog. So if you're gonna get a dog walker, perhaps walk him in a different neighborhood, maybe drive him somewhere. If he is having, it didn't say he was being reactive, but I'm like, if he went after a dog after he got off the leash, how does he act when he sees things? So if he was kind of reactive, I would be kind of hesitant to have a dog walker come in because not all dog walkers can handle reactive dogs, but that's not what the prompt says. So just keep that in mind. If he was reactive, then maybe suggesting walking him in a different area or keeping the walk short and confined to a certain area. But yeah, really important to consider.
Outside of that, however, we do like to remind clients that training is also can be a form of enrichment, although we really don't want them to get hyper fixated on just training, just because I do think that a little too much school can make parents and dogs resent it a little bit, like, oh, everything is so damn structured and everything is so boring. So we do want to encourage other forms of enrichment that are actually pretty easy, creating games or having the parents acquire certain types of enrichment toys. Given that Bradley is 2 years old and probably a minimum of 50 pounds, we're probably going to encourage toys that are not that easily destroyed. And then again, making sure Bradley doesn't have any bad habits like eating his own toys. So making sure that we are advising on toys that work for the parents that are also as long lasting as possible. We really don't have much control over how long lasting a certain toy can be, but we do try to pick the ones that are sturdier. And then other forms of enrichment as well doesn't have to necessarily be wholly reliant on toys. Enrichment could literally just be, an Amazon box that's taped shut with dog treats inside and stab some holes in it and just throw it in the backyard. Make sure the dog doesn't eat the cardboard, but that can be a great replacement to a walk for parents who don't necessarily have endless funds for a dog walker. And also they are so tired and they can't walk the dog because he's not ready to be walked in his environment quite yet. So definitely going to encourage a lot of different types of enrichment. Also circling back to if there are any other helpers around, this could just as easily be a neighbor who's willing to throw the ball. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who has to have all these rules with the dog. It really could just be one simple relationship of maybe the grandkid comes over. Bradley has enough good enough behavior to not trample over a grandkid, and so they can play fetch together. And so they can kind of, get a little enrichment on a different side of the family versus the other side that's just kind of his primary caregivers that are just trying to get him to survive happily in their household. So those are some things that we would consider. Um, choose any bones, choose things that are safety, keep an eye on the dog before you just start dishing things out. Make sure he's not going to choke on it, anything like that. But once you identify what is safe to give to the dog, these are also fantastic ways to kind of keep them nice and enriched. But yeah, and then the very last one is going to be training.
Training. So it's funny how we get to training last, and it's actually not that thick of a point here. But first things first, so what I want to teach this dog is maybe sit or down. That way he can have a foundation for the future training I'm going to give him, which is stay and most importantly, station training or place, whatever you call it. We call it place, other people call it other things, but I really want him to have an alternative to being in the client's faces or trying to jump on them all the time. I think that place is a really good way to help encourage the dog to be okay by themselves and encourage them to, well, maybe I can relax. Maybe relaxing is an option. So sit down, stay in station training. I want to work on these as the core first. I'll also work on anti-jumping protocols. Now, notice I didn't say like a particular skill. Anti-jumping protocols just means that I would have scenarios where he probably will want to jump on me, but I'm going to reinforce him for everything else he's doing that's not jumping. So if you just stand next to me, I'm going to reinforce you. If you stand while I sit down, I'm going to reinforce you. I'm going to do everything I can to reinforce his paws being on the floor. If he has a foundation of sit down or stay may become his default behaviors for that to help him cope with what I'm doing, which is perfectly fine, which is why we teach this first. But I will be having scenarios where he probably would want to jump on me, and I'm going to reinforce him for not jumping. So maybe me walking into the door, that actually may be the hardest one. Walking into the door, maybe he's tethered already, and I work on, oh, you're on the floor, it's a treat. You're on the floor, it's a treat. You're on the floor and I walk past you, it's a treat. I may also have a scenario where I have a fake coffee time, and I'm like, hey, if you go to your place, you're going to get a treat. So all of this is kind of in the same circle of things. So sit down, stay, station training, and anti-jumping protocols. These all are going to work really nicely together eventually. Directional cueing, as we call it. So directional cueing meaning we typically use get out. We have a cue that we call get out, which means we want the dog to exit the room, meaning going through a threshold. So I have a gate right there. If I tell my dogs to get out, they will know, oh, she means go behind that gate. We would teach Bradley that as well, probably sooner. That way that we don't have to like make him go somewhere. We can teach him to walk away or walk away from us and go somewhere else. We can do this without body pressure. We can do this by just using treats and pointing, and he will get it over time. Maybe if time allows, crate training. I threw that in there. Maybe he gets really hyped up. Maybe he needs further encouragement to go to sleep. And maybe we don't want to put him outside. Maybe it's raining, it's pouring down, maybe it's too hot. So we want to be able to put him away without him being too upset. Crate training is a good way to do this, but crate training takes time. And we don't know his history with that, but if we have time, we'd like to teach that. But also, you also want to focus on tricks like spin or anything else. Training can working on things that are problem behaviors for clients can be, it can take the fun out of training sometimes. Now, what the training plan that I just said was pretty fun. Well, I want to make sure it stays fun, and the client kind of forgets the problems that they're having with this dog by teaching them something that is really silly, like, oh, he can spin or he could do this. And depending on the client, the first thing you may teach may be something even easier than sit or down or stay. It may be spin first, or it may be touch first, depending on how they feel. If they've been feeling really defeated by working with Bradley, we want to make sure that we have easy things and fun things to kind of offset that. I hope I'm making sense. Make sure I am. But yeah, y'all, that's the training. This is how we would solve this case.
That's how smart bitch works through things. Um,
It's a very small way. This is
yeah,
not the
the
full.
chunk. I hope that this wasn't the world's longest video. But that's how Taylor and I kind of hammer through cases. And as you can see, if this were a bigger case, like we would spend a lot more time on it. And typically, the consultations that we'll host typically run a minimum of an hour and a half to 2 hours. And that goes for pretty much any case. But oftentimes, if there are cases where there is limited mobility, or there's just an offset of energy, right? Like you have one energy style here, and then like something that's just like there's no balance. We have to try to establish that balance as soon as possible. And also, we like to have conversations. Let's say that we do a lot of digging and it doesn't really look like things are not going to work out. We may also help those parents consider different options if they feel as if this dog is not fit for their home. So oftentimes we'll help people navigate that as well. And there's nothing wrong with that, given that this case is, let's just say they're definitely going to need to be involved in order to get this dog to become a little bit more amenable. So hopefully you get a little insight in how Smart Bitch deep dives in this type of stuff. But yeah, that's our homework assignment. Hope we made it A plus. And okay, bye. How do I stop it?